Before we begin, please note that the information in this video is for educational and informational purposes only. The advice provided is based on research and experience in academic success strategies and is not a substitute for guidance from your academic advisors, professors, or nursing program administrators. Always consult with your institution's faculty for specific academic requirements and best practices. You just slammed your laptop shut. It's 1:37 a.m. Your eyes feel like they've been rubbed with sandpaper. There's a dull, throbbing headache behind your right temple. And for the life of you, you cannot remember the difference between hyperkalemia and hypokalemia. You just spent the last 6 hours staring at a screen, clicking through modules, and trying to absorb a dense chapter on fluid and electrolyte imbalances. You look at the chaotic landscape of your desk, the half-empty coffee mug, the stack of notes that look more like cryptic scribbles, the endless tabs open on your browser, and a wave of cold dread washes over you. You think to yourself, what have I gotten myself into? Can I actually do this? If that moment feels painfully familiar, I want you to take a deep breath. You are not alone in this feeling. In fact, you are in the silent majority. The journey to becoming a nurse through an online program is one of the most demanding, isolating, and mentally taxing paths a person can choose. It's a path paved with incredible intention, the desire to heal, to care, to make a profound difference in people's lives. You signed up for this because you have a calling. You saw a future where you were the calm, competent presence in a chaotic hospital room, a source of comfort and expertise. You pictured yourself in those scrubs, finally earning the title of registered nurse. But right now, that future feels a million miles away. The dream is buried under an avalanche of discussion board posts, APA-formatted papers, proctored exams, and a constant nagging feeling of being perpetually behind. This isn't what they showed in the brochure. They showed smiling, confident students typing on their laptops in a bright, airy living room. They sold you on the flexibility of learning from home. What they didn't tell you is that flexibility is often a code word for a brutal, unstructured reality that requires a level of self-discipline you never knew you needed. They didn't tell you that your home, your sanctuary, would transform into a high-pressure classroom you can never truly leave. The same couch you collapse on after a long day is the same couch where you must master the intricacies of pharmacology. The same kitchen table where you share meals with your family becomes the command center for battling pathophysiology. And the isolation? It's a profound and unspoken challenge of online nursing education. In a traditional campus setting, there's a built-in support system. You have the spontaneous study sessions in the library, the quick chats after class to clarify a confusing concept, the shared groans in the hallway after a tough exam. There's a communal energy, a sense that you are all in the trenches together. Online, that camaraderie evaporates. It's just you, your screen, and the deafening silence. You might be in a virtual discussion group, but it lacks the immediacy, the human connection. You're left to wonder, is anyone else struggling this much? Am I the only one who feels like an imposter? This isolation breeds doubt, and doubt is the silent killer of nursing school dreams. Let's be brutally honest about the core problem. The way most people try to tackle online nursing school is fundamentally broken. We treat it like a regular academic program just on a computer. We try to use the same old study habits that got us through prerequisite courses. We binge study before exams. We passively watch lectures. We highlight our textbooks until the pages glow in the dark, hoping the information will magically transfer into our brains through osmosis. We try to muscle our way through with sheer willpower and caffeine. This is the path to burnout. It's studying harder, not smarter. And in nursing school, where the volume of information is like drinking from a fire hose, studying harder will only make you drown faster. I want to tell you about a student I once knew. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah was the classic online nursing student profile. She was in her early 30s, a mother of 2 young children, working a part-time job to make ends meet. She was brilliant, passionate, and deeply committed to becoming a pediatric nurse. But 6 months into her program, she was falling apart. She was surviving on 4 hours of sleep, constantly stressed, and her grades were starting to slip. She was acing the assignments that required effort, like papers and projects, but she was bombing the exams that required deep, long-term retention of complex clinical information. She confessed to me that she felt like a complete failure. She was studying constantly, sacrificing time with her kids, her partner, and herself, but nothing was sticking. She was on the verge of quitting, convinced she just wasn't cut out for it. The turning point for Sarah wasn't a magical burst of motivation or finding more hours in the day. The turning point was a radical shift in her strategy. She realized that the methods that made her successful in the past were the very things causing her to fail now. She stopped trying to cram and started to build systems. She stopped passively consuming information and started actively engaging with it. She stopped seeing her online program as a series of hurdles to be cleared and started treating it like a professional training ground for her future career. And that is exactly why I've created this video. This isn't just another list of generic study tips you've already heard 100 times. We are not going to talk about making a schedule or finding a quiet place to study. You're a future nurse. You're smart enough to know that already. Instead, we are going to dive deep into 5 essential, tactical, and psychological shifts that are specifically engineered for the unique environment of online nursing education. These are the strategies that took Sarah from the brink of dropping out to graduating with honors and landing her dream job. These are the strategies that will transform you from an overwhelmed, anxious student into a confident, organized, and effective learner. Over the next few minutes, we are going to dismantle the old, broken way of studying and build a new, powerful framework from the ground up. We will replace that feeling of drinking from a fire hose with a clear, manageable system for processing and retaining vast amounts of information. We will replace that sense of isolation with the feeling of control and empowerment over your own education. We will address that nagging fear, the "am I good enough?" fear, by giving you a process that builds not just knowledge, but true clinical competence and confidence. You clicked on this video because you're looking for answers. You're looking for a better way. And I can tell you with absolute conviction that a better way exists. It's not about being smarter or having more time. It's about having the right system. So, if you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, if you're ready to stop feeling perpetually behind and start feeling in control, then you are in the right place. The very first step, the foundation upon which all other success is built, is to completely reframe how you view and manage your time. But it's far more than just blocking out study hours in a planner. It's about demolishing one of the biggest myths of online learning and adopting the mindset of a high-performance executive. It all starts with our first essential tip. Treat your calendar like a fortress. This is the first and most critical shift in mindset for any online nursing student. We're not managing time. We are strategically blocking it. The difference is monumental. Time management is passive. It's about making to-do lists and hoping you get to them. Time blocking is active, offensive, and decisive. You are telling your time where to go, not asking where it went. Think about the most chaotic, high-stakes environment in a hospital. The emergency room on a Saturday night. It seems like pure chaos, but underneath there is a system of triage, of prioritizing, of focusing intensely on one patient at a time to save a life. The ER doctor isn't simultaneously intubating a patient, while also diagnosing another one and ordering labs for a third. They are executing a series of focused single-task actions. Why? Because multitasking is a myth. It's a dangerous illusion that makes you feel productive while actually destroying your focus and increasing your error rate. In nursing, errors cost lives. In nursing school, errors cost you your grade, your confidence, and ultimately your dream. So the first thing you must do is perform a ruthless audit of your week. Open a blank calendar, Google Calendar, a physical planner, whatever works for you. And for 1 week, just track everything. From the 15 minutes you spent scrolling on Instagram to the 45-minute phone call with your mom, to your commute, your meals, your clinicals, your kids' soccer practice. Be brutally honest. At the end of that week, you will have a map of your time. And for most people, it's a shocking revelation. You'll see exactly where the minutes and hours are leaking away. Now, with this data, you become the architect of your future weeks. You're going to build your ideal study schedule not with vague blobs of study time, but with surgical precision. This is where we separate the students who struggle from the students who succeed. A struggling student's calendar says, study for anatomy from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. A successful student's calendar says, from 2 to 2:50 p.m., review and redraw the brachial plexus from memory. From 2:50 to 3 p.m., walk around, get water. From 3 to 3:50 p.m., complete 25 practice questions on Chapter 4, the muscular system. Do you see the difference? One is a wish. The other is a command. It's a non-negotiable appointment with a specific task. By breaking down large subjects into smaller, digestible, and actionable tasks, you eliminate the overwhelm. You never sit down and wonder, what should I study now? Your calendar has already made that decision for you. Your only job is to execute. This removes decision fatigue, which is one of the biggest silent killers of productivity. Let's talk about the nature of these blocks. You need to schedule what computer scientist Cal Newport calls deep work sessions. These are 90-minute to 2-hour blocks of pure, uninterrupted focus. No phone, no email notifications, no television in the background. Tell your family this is your protected time. Put a sign on your door if you have to. During these deep work blocks, you are tackling the most cognitively demanding material, the stuff that makes your brain hurt a little. Pathophysiology, pharmacology, complex care plans. This is where real learning happens, where neural pathways are forged. A powerful technique to use within these blocks is the Pomodoro technique. It's simple. You study with intense focus for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. After 4 of these Pomodoros, you take a longer break of 15 to 30 minutes. Why does this work? It leverages the psychology of your brain. Knowing a break is just 25 minutes away makes it easier to start and maintain focus. Those short breaks allow your brain to consolidate information, preventing burnout and keeping you fresh for the next sprint. It turns a marathon 3-hour study session into a series of manageable, focused sprints. Now let's get real. Life happens. A kid gets sick, your boss asks you to stay late, the Wi-Fi goes out. A rigid schedule shatters the moment it collides with reality. This is why a high-performance schedule isn't just about work. It's about building in resilience. For every 3 hours of scheduled, focused work, you should schedule an hour of flex time or a buffer block. This is unscheduled time you can use to catch up if a previous task took longer than expected, or to handle unexpected life events. If nothing goes wrong, great. Use that time to review, get ahead, or just relax. This buffer is your pressure release valve. It turns your schedule from a fragile piece of glass into a resilient, flexible structure that can bend without breaking. And speaking of relaxing, you must schedule your downtime with the same seriousness you schedule your study time. Block out time for exercise. Block out a date night with your partner. Block out do-nothing time. If you don't, your brain will never truly turn off. You'll be in a constant state of low-grade anxiety, feeling like you should be studying. This leads to burnout faster than anything else. When you give yourself permission to be fully off, you enable yourself to be fully on when it's time to work. Think of yourself as a professional athlete. An athlete doesn't train 24/7. Recovery is a critical, scheduled part of their performance plan. Your brain is your primary asset in nursing school. You have to schedule its recovery. Let's put this all together with a hypothetical student. Let's call her Jessica. Jessica works part-time as a CNA, has 2 young kids, and is enrolled in an online BSN program. She feels like she's drowning. She studies whenever she can grab a spare 20 minutes, usually with the TV on and one eye on her phone. Her notes are disorganized, and she feels constantly behind. Here's how Jessica applies tip number 1. First, she tracks her time for a week and is horrified to find she spends nearly 10 hours a week just scrolling social media, and another 5 hours on low-value tasks that could be batched. The next week, she builds her fortress. She sits down on Sunday and blocks out her entire week. Her work shifts and kids' school schedules go in first. Those are her big rocks. Then she schedules 3 90-minute deep work blocks on her days off, specifically for her toughest class, pharmacology. She labels them Mon 9 to 10:30 a.m. Review antihypertensives and create flashcards. She schedules shorter, 45-minute blocks in the evenings after the kids are in bed for lighter tasks like responding to discussion board posts or reviewing anatomy notes. She uses the Pomodoro technique within these blocks. She schedules 2 one-hour buffer blocks throughout the week. Crucially, she blocks out Friday night from 7 p.m. onwards as family movie night, no guilt, no books. She also schedules 30-minute workouts 3 times a week. The first week is hard. Her brain rebels against the structure, but she sticks to it. By week 2, something amazing happens. She feels in control. She's less stressed because she's not constantly deciding what to do next. She's getting more done in less time because her focus is concentrated. Her grades start to improve. She's more present with her family during her scheduled downtime because she knows her study time is protected. She didn't find more time. She made the time she already had count. She stopped managing time and started leading it. This is the foundation. Without this, the other tips I'm about to share won't matter. You can have the best study techniques in the world, but if you don't have dedicated, protected time to implement them, it's like having a state-of-the-art operating room with no scheduled surgeries. It's just potential gathering dust. So, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to become the CEO of your schedule. Be ruthless. Be intentional. Build your fortress block by block. Once you have the structure in place, the next question becomes, what do you do inside these blocks? And more importantly, where do you do it? Because the place you study is just as critical as the time you spend there. Most online students make a catastrophic mistake when it comes to their study environment, a mistake that silently sabotages their focus and makes learning 10 times harder than it needs to be. We need to fix that. We need to turn your study space, whether it's a dedicated office or a tiny corner of your bedroom, into a sanctuary of focus. And it has nothing to do with buying an expensive desk or a fancy chair. It's about psychology. It's about training your brain. See, your mind is an incredibly powerful association machine. It links places with feelings and activities. Your bed is linked with sleep and relaxation. The kitchen table is linked with food and family conversation. The couch is linked with Netflix and unwinding. When you try to study pharmacology on your bed, you're sending your brain a ridiculously mixed signal. You're telling it to enter a state of high focus and critical thinking in the exact same spot you've trained it to shut down and go to sleep. It's like trying to drive a car by pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. You'll burn a lot of fuel, make a lot of noise, but you won't get anywhere. And you'll end up exhausted and frustrated. I remember working with a student, let's call her Maria. She was brilliant, passionate, and was juggling a full-time job as a certified nursing assistant while taking online classes to get her RN. She was doing what so many of you do. She'd come home from a grueling 12-hour shift, grab her laptop and crawl into bed to study. She told me it felt like she was reading the same paragraph over and over again. Her eyes would glaze over. The temptation to just close the laptop and drift off was immense. Or worse, she'd tell herself she'd just watch one episode of a show to relax first, and 3 hours later, she'd wake up in a panic, having accomplished nothing. She was falling behind, her confidence was plummeting, and she started to believe that maybe she just wasn't smart enough for nursing school. But the problem wasn't her intelligence. The problem was her environment. Her brain was at war with itself and it was losing. This brings us to our first and arguably most foundational tip. You must create and defend a dedicated study space. I don't care if it's a walk-in closet, a corner of your dining room, or a small folding table you set up and take down every day. The size is irrelevant. The principle is everything. This space has one job and one job only: nursing school. This is your command center, your sanctuary of focus. Here's how you build it starting today. First, you define the territory. Pick your spot. And from this moment forward, you make a pact with yourself. In this space, you only do things related to your nursing studies. No scrolling through Instagram. No online shopping. No eating a meal while watching a lecture. When you are in this space, you are a nursing student, period. The moment you want to do something else, you physically get up and leave the space. This isn't about being rigid for the sake of it. It's about creating a powerful Pavlovian response. When you sit down in that chair, your brain should immediately know, without conscious effort, that it's time to focus. Stops fighting you because the signal is crystal clear. Second, you engineer that space for deep work. This is where we get practical. Let's talk about your senses. Start with light. Studying in a dimly lit room is a recipe for eye strain, headaches, and drowsiness. You're reading some of the most complex material of your life. Don't make it harder on your eyes. Natural light is best, so if you can set up near a window, do it. If not, invest in a good, bright desk lamp. Not a warm, moody lamp. You want a lamp that mimics daylight, something that tells your brain, it's go time, not nap time. Next, control the sound. For many online students, home is a chaotic environment. Kids, pets, partners, roommates, the distractions are endless. This is where a good pair of noise-canceling headphones becomes one of the most valuable investments you can make in your education. They are your shield. They create a bubble of silence where you can actually hear yourself think. If silence is too deafening, experiment with white noise apps or websites. There's a ton of research on how frequencies like white or brown noise can help mask distracting ambient sounds and improve concentration. Instrumental music, classical pieces, or lo-fi study beats can also work wonders for many people. Find what works for you and make it part of your study environment. Now for the biggest battle: eliminating distractions. Your desk should be a minimalist dream. The only things within your arm's reach should be the absolute essentials for the task at hand. Your laptop, a textbook, a notebook, a pen. That's it. All the other books, papers, and clutter? Put them away. A cluttered space creates a cluttered mind. Every object in your field of vision is a tiny little piece of information your brain has to process, a tiny distraction that pulls away a sliver of your cognitive energy. You need every single sliver you can get. But the physical clutter is easy compared to the digital clutter. Your phone is the single greatest threat to your success in online nursing school. That little device is engineered by teams of geniuses to be as addictive as possible. Every notification, every buzz, every little red is a tiny dopamine hit designed to pull your attention away. You cannot win a battle of willpower against it every single day. So you don't fight. You remove the enemy from the battlefield. When you enter your study space, your phone goes into another room. Not on your desk face down. Not in your pocket on silent. In another room. If you tell me you need it for two-factor authentication or to look something up, my response is, handle the authentication, then put it in the other room. Look things up on your computer. Be ruthless about this. This one habit alone can dramatically increase the quality and efficiency of your study time. Finally, to tie this all together, create an activation ritual. This is a simple 2-minute routine you do every single time before you start studying in your space. It could be as simple as making a cup of tea, putting on your noise-canceling headphones, and taking 3 slow, deep breaths. It could be turning on your desk lamp and opening your planner to the day's tasks. The action itself doesn't matter as much as its consistency. This ritual becomes a trigger, a clear signal to your brain that the transition from home life to study life is now complete. It's like a pilot going through a pre-flight checklist. It primes your mind for the task ahead. Let's go back to Maria. We worked together to implement this. She couldn't afford a new desk, so she cleared off a small bookshelf in her living room. That became her spot. She bought a $10 LED lamp. She started charging her phone in the kitchen overnight and wouldn't retrieve it until her scheduled study block was over. Her ritual was simple. She'd put on her headphones, start a specific instrumental playlist, and review her goals for that session for 1 minute. The change wasn't instantaneous, but within a week, she said it felt like a fog had lifted. She was no longer fighting the urge to nap. She was absorbing the material on the first read. She finished her assignments in half the time, which meant she actually had more free time to relax, truly relax, away from her study space. She stopped feeling like a failure and started feeling like the competent, intelligent student she always was. She didn't change her brain. She just changed the environment her brain was operating in. This first tip isn't just about being organized. It's about respecting your own mind. It's about creating the conditions for success before you even open a textbook. It's the foundation. Because once you have this sanctuary of focus, the question changes. It's no longer, how can I possibly focus in this chaos? It becomes, now that I'm here and ready, what's the most effective way to actually learn this material? You've built the operating room, now you need the surgical tools. And that's where so many students get stuck. They sit down in their perfect space, open their textbook to a 60-page chapter on fluid and electrolytes, and their heart sinks. They start reading, their eyes move across the page, but nothing sticks. It feels like pouring water into a bucket full of holes. How do you stop passively reading and start actively learning? How do you conquer that mountain of information without just hoping it absorbs through osmosis? That is the critical next step, and it's exactly what we're going to break down next. The secret lies in shifting from being a passive recipient of information to an active participant in your own learning. It's the difference between being a spectator in a stadium and being the athlete on the field. The spectator sees the game, but the athlete feels it, understands the strategy, and builds the muscle memory to win. For you, the nursing student, the game is patient care, and the stakes are infinitely higher. Your stadium is the NCLEX, the clinical floor, the emergency room. You can't just be familiar with the material, you have to own it. The first step in owning it is to wage war on your highlighter. I know it feels productive. The glowing colors on the page look like progress. But neuroscientifically, highlighting is often one of the least effective study methods. It creates something called the illusion of competence. You recognize the highlighted text, your brain says, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before." And you mistake that familiarity for true understanding. It's a cognitive trap. Rereading your notes or textbooks falls into the same category. It's like watching the same movie over and over. You can quote the lines, but you can't direct the scene. So what's the alternative? It's a concept that will feel harder, more demanding, and at times even frustrating. And that's a good thing. It's called active recall. Active recall is the process of actively retrieving information from your memory. It's not about putting information in. It's about pulling it out. Think of your brain as a massive warehouse. Passive learning is like having a delivery truck dump pallet after pallet of information onto the loading dock. It's all there somewhere, but it's a chaotic mess. Active recall is the process of sending in a worker with a specific order, forcing them to navigate the aisles, find the exact box on the right shelf, and bring it back to the front. The first few times, that worker might get lost. They might grab the wrong box. But with practice, they build mental pathways. They learn the layout. Soon, they can retrieve any piece of information instantly and accurately. That's the brain you want when a doctor is asking for a specific drug dosage, or a patient's condition suddenly changes. So how do you practice this? Let me give you some concrete, field-tested strategies. First, the blank sheet method. It is as simple as it is powerful. After you finish a chapter on, say, the pathophysiology of heart failure, close the book. Put away your notes. Take out a completely blank sheet of paper and write down everything you can remember about the topic. Draw diagrams, list symptoms, explain the difference between systolic and diastolic failure. Just pour everything out of your brain onto the page. It will be messy. It will be incomplete. You will hit walls where you can't remember a key term or a specific mechanism. This is the most important part of the exercise. The struggle is where the learning happens. Once you've exhausted your memory, open your book and your notes. With a different colored pen, correct your mistakes and fill in the gaps. That sheet of paper now becomes your ultimate study guide. The parts in the first color are the things you already know well. The parts in the second color are a visual, undeniable map of your weaknesses. You now know exactly what to focus on, instead of wasting time rereading the things you've already mastered. Second, become the teacher. One of the most profound ways to learn something is to try and explain it to someone else in simple terms. Find a willing victim. A friend, your partner, your cat, it doesn't matter. Try to explain the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system to them. If you find yourself stumbling using jargon you can't define or saying it just, works, you haven't mastered it. This process forces you to confront the fuzzy edges of your understanding. You have to organize the concepts logically, create analogies, and simplify complex ideas. If you can make your non-medical friend understand why an ACE inhibitor lowers blood pressure, you will never forget it yourself. Third, create your own questions. Most students hunt for practice questions, which is good. But elite students also create them. As you study a topic, constantly ask yourself, if I were the professor, how would I test this? What would be the trickiest? Select all that apply question I could write for these medication side effects. This forces you to think at a higher level. You're not just memorizing facts. You're analyzing relationships, comparing and contrasting concepts, and anticipating potential points of confusion. In doing so, you essentially reverse engineer the exam and build a much deeper, more flexible understanding of the material. Now, active recall is the powerful workout, but it needs a smart training schedule. You can't just go to the gym once and expect to be fit forever. That schedule is called spaced repetition. In the late 19th century, a psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered something called the forgetting curve. It shows that we forget information at an exponential rate. You might forget 50% of a lecture within a day, 80% within a week, unless you do something to interrupt that curve. Spaced repetition is the science of interrupting it at the perfect moment. Here's how it works. You review a piece of information right before you're about to forget it. Each time you do this, the memory becomes more durable, and the time until you need to review it again gets longer. You might review a new concept after 1 day, then after 3 days, then a week, then a month. This process tells your brain, pay attention. This isn't just random data. This is critical survival information. Store it for the long term. For nursing students, this is a game changer. The sheer volume of information you have to learn is staggering. You can't afford to learn about diuretics in your first semester, and then forget it by the time you're in your Med-SURG rotation. Spaced repetition builds a cumulative, rock-solid foundation of knowledge. The easiest way to implement this is with digital flashcard apps like Anki or Quizlet. These programs use algorithms to automatically schedule your reviews. When you get a card right, it shows it to you less frequently. When you get one wrong, it shows it to you more frequently. The key is to make your own cards. The act of creating the card is a form of active recall itself. Don't just copy and paste definitions. Phrase your cards as questions. Instead of a card that says metoprolol beta blocker, make one that says, what is the primary mechanism of action for metoprolol? On the front, and the answer on the back. Let's imagine 2 students, we'll call them Jessica and Maria. They're both in the same online pharmacology class. Jessica spends 6 hours every Saturday rereading the week's chapters and going over her highlighted notes. She feels like she's working hard. Maria spends maybe 3 hours. But her time is different. She spends 1 hour creating question-based flashcards in a spaced repetition app. She then spends the next 2 hours using the blank sheet method for the most complex topics and explaining them out loud to her very confused but supportive golden retriever. Initially, Jessica feels more confident. The information feels familiar to her. Maria, on the other hand, feels the struggle. Active recall is mentally taxing. But then the first major exam comes. Jessica sits down and the questions look familiar, but the specific answers are fuzzy. She mixes up drug endings and confuses side effects. The illusion of competence shatters. Maria sits down and the questions feel like a conversation she's already had with herself a dozen times. She doesn't just recognize the material. She understands it from the inside out. She can apply it. Maria gets an A. Jessica gets a C and feels completely demoralized, wondering how all her hard work didn't pay off. The difference wasn't the hours spent. It was the quality and strategy of those hours. Active recall combined with spaced repetition is not about studying longer. It's about studying deeper. It's about respecting your own time and your own brain. It transforms studying from a passive, frustrating chore into an active, empowering process of building real, durable knowledge. This is the knowledge that won't just get you through the next exam, but will stay with you, protecting you and your future patients on the clinical floor. So, you have your dedicated space, your structured schedule, and now a powerful evidence-based method for actually learning and retaining the material. But there's still a missing piece. Nursing school isn't just about memorizing isolated facts from different classes. It's about integration. It's about seeing how the pharmacology of a cardiac drug connects to the pathophysiology of the heart you learned last semester, and how that informs the nursing interventions you'll perform in your clinicals. How do you stop seeing your classes as separate silos and start building the big picture, interconnected web of knowledge that expert nurses possess? That is the art of synthesis, and it's the next critical skill we need to unlock. That is the art of synthesis, and it's the next critical skill we need to unlock. Think about it. In 1 week, you're memorizing the mechanism of action for beta blockers in pharmacology. The next week, you're studying the pathophysiology of hypertension in med-surg. And on a discussion board for your fundamentals class, you're writing about the proper technique for taking a blood pressure. To your brain, these feel like 3 completely separate, unrelated tasks. 3 different boxes to check. You might even get an A on all 3 assignments. But then you get a test question, or worse, a real patient that requires you to connect all 3 of those dots in a single moment of critical thinking, and suddenly you freeze. The knowledge is in there somewhere, but it's locked away in separate vaults. You have the ingredients, but you don't have the recipe. This is the single biggest trap of online nursing school. The modular format, the discrete assignments, the very structure of the curriculum can trick your brain into building walls between subjects. But nursing doesn't happen in a module. It happens in a human being, where pharmacology, pathophysiology, and patient assessment are all happening at the exact same time, in the same body. Synthesis is the process of tearing down those walls in your mind and rebuilding your knowledge, not as a series of disconnected islands, but as a single, massive, interconnected continent. It's the difference between knowing a fact and understanding a patient. Let's talk about a student. We'll call her Maria. Maria was brilliant at memorization. She used flashcards, she used spaced repetition, and she could recite the top 5 side effects of lisinopril in her sleep. She knew that in chronic kidney disease, a patient's potassium levels could rise. She knew that a peak T wave on an EKG was a bad sign. She had all these individual pearls of wisdom, polished and perfect. But on her first major med-surg exam, she got a question that described a patient with chronic kidney disease, whose latest lab work showed a potassium level of 6.2, and the EKG showed peak T waves. The question asked for the nurse's priority action. Maria panicked. She saw the pieces: kidney disease, high potassium, the EKG, but she couldn't see the picture. She couldn't synthesize the data into a single, terrifying diagnosis: life-threatening hyperkalemia that could lead to cardiac arrest at any second. The facts were there, but the connection, the story of what was happening to this patient, was missing. Her mistake wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was a lack of integration. So how do we fix this? How do we train our brains to think like a seasoned nurse, not just a textbook index? The first and most powerful tool is the concept map. Now I know what you're thinking. You've been told to do concept maps before. They feel like busy work, another box to check. But most students use them wrong. They use them as a glorified outline, a slightly more visual way to list facts. That's not the point. A true concept map is a detective's evidence board. It's a messy, sprawling, interconnected web that forces you to explain the relationships between ideas. Let's try it. Instead of just making a list for heart failure, put heart failure in a giant circle in the middle of a blank page. Now don't just list symptoms. Draw a branch off the main circle and label it decreased cardiac output. This is the core problem. Now ask yourself why? What happens because of this? Well, if the heart can't pump forward effectively, blood backs up. Draw another line from decreased cardiac output that says fluid backs up into lungs. What does that cause? Draw a line from that bubble and write crackles on auscultation, and another one that says shortness of breath. You've just connected a core pathophysiological concept to two key symptoms. You didn't just memorize them. You understood their origin. Now let's bring in pharmacology. How do we treat this fluid backup? We use a diuretic like furosemide. So draw a new branch for pharmacological interventions and connect it to furosemide. But don't stop there. How does furosemide work? It inhibits the reabsorption of sodium and chloride in the loop of Henle. Okay, what does that do? It makes you excrete more water. Draw a line from furosemide that says increases urine output and connect that line back to your fluid backs up into lungs bubble with a note that says helps resolve. See what just happened? The drug is no longer an isolated fact. It is a direct solution to a specific physiological problem you've already mapped out. And you can keep going. What's a major side effect of furosemide? It wastes potassium. So draw a line from furosemide that says, risk for hypokalemia. What does hypokalemia cause? Risk for cardiac dysrhythmias. Now your concept map shows not only how a drug helps, but also how it can harm, and you understand the why behind both. This is synthesis. The second technique is what I call the patient story method. Facts are cold and easy to forget. Stories are warm and they stick. For every major disease process you study, create a patient avatar in your mind. Don't just study diabetes. Study Mr. Chan, a 54-year-old high school history teacher who was just diagnosed with type 2 diabetes during a routine physical. He's a little overweight, he's stressed about his job, and he loves his wife's cooking, which is full of carbs. Now, every piece of information you learn about diabetes gets filtered through the lens of Mr. Chen's story. When you learn about metformin, you're not just memorizing its class and side effects. You're asking, what do I need to teach Mr. Chen about taking metformin? He should take it with meals to avoid GI upset. That's important because I don't want him to stop taking his medication. When you learn about the signs of hypoglycemia, you're not just memorizing diaphoresis, shakiness, confusion. You're thinking, what if Mr. Chan takes his metformin but then gets busy and skips lunch? He might get hypoglycemic. I need to teach him to always carry a snack. I need to tell his wife what to look for. By creating a person, you create context. You transform abstract data points into a human narrative. And your brain is wired to remember narratives far better than it remembers lists of facts. You're building a virtual patient case in your head, allowing you to practice your clinical judgment long before you ever step foot in a real clinical setting. The final and simplest strategy is to become a relentless toddler. And by that, I mean you must constantly, obsessively, and annoyingly ask one question about everything you learn. Why? You learn that patients with liver failure can develop ascites, which is fluid in the abdomen. Don't just write it down. Ask why. Because a failing liver can't produce enough albumin. Why does that matter? Because albumin is a protein that keeps fluid inside the blood vessels. Without enough of it, the fluid leaks out into the surrounding tissues like the abdomen. You just connected liver failure to protein synthesis to oncotic pressure to a major clinical manifestation. You learned that you should give morphine for the chest pain associated with a heart attack. Ask why. Yes, it's a pain reliever, but that's not the whole story. Morphine is also a vasodilator. Why does that matter? It reduces both preload and afterload on the heart, which decreases the heart's workload and its oxygen demand. And a heart that's having an attack is desperate for oxygen. So morphine isn't just treating the symptom of pain, it's treating the underlying physiological crisis. Asking why is the crowbar that pries open the black box of memorization. It forces your brain to build a logical bridge from one piece of information to the next. It's an active, investigative process, not a passive one. When you understand the why, the what becomes almost impossible to forget. These three techniques, concept mapping, the patient story method, and relentlessly asking why, are not about studying harder. They're about studying deeper. They are your tools to break down the artificial walls between your classes. This is how you start to build that flexible, resilient, and interconnected web of knowledge that defines an expert nurse. It's how you ensure that when you're faced with a complex patient, you don't just see a collection of symptoms and lab values. You see a story, you understand the plot, and you know exactly what chapter comes next. So you've mastered the art of connecting the dots, of weaving together this incredible tapestry of knowledge. But even with the best synthesis skills, you can find yourself drowning in a sea of deadlines, discussion posts, and virtual lectures. The sheer volume of work in an online program is a beast of its own. How do you tame the calendar and manage your time so you actually have the space to think deeply and synthesize? That's where our next tip comes in, and it's all about becoming the master of your own schedule, not its victim. This brings us to our third and arguably most foundational tip. Become a ruthless master of your schedule through time blocking and thematic days. Let's be honest. The default state for an online nursing student is chaos. It's a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety fueled by a mental to-do list that's a mile long. I need to read Chapter 12 for Patho, watch the lecture on cardiac meds, post in the discussion forum for ethics, study for the health assessment midterm, and oh, I have to pick up the kids, make dinner, and maybe, just maybe, sleep for 4 hours. This isn't a plan. It's a recipe for burnout. A simple to-do list is your enemy in nursing school. Why? Because it's just a list of wishes. It doesn't respect the reality of time. It lists 20 hours of work you're trying to cram into a 6-hour window. This is what I call the to-do list trap. You look at the list, feel overwhelmed, procrastinate by doing something easy like laundry, and then feel guilty for not tackling the big items. The cycle repeats and your stress levels go through the roof. Time blocking is the antidote to this chaos. It's the practice of scheduling every single minute of your day. I know that sounds intense, but stick with me. This isn't about becoming a robot. It's about becoming intentional. It's about telling your time where to go, instead of wondering where it went. Here's how you start. Open up a digital calendar, Google Calendar, Outlook, whatever you use. The first things you block in are your non-negotiables. These are the big rocks you have to plan around. Sleep. I'm serious. Schedule 7 to 8 hours of sleep. It's not a luxury. It's a cognitive necessity for memory consolidation. Next, block in your work shifts, your clinical hours, your kids' soccer games, family dinner, date night. These are the pillars of your life. They go on the calendar first in a distinct color. This act alone is a powerful statement. Your life outside of school matters and deserves to be protected. Now look at the blank spaces that are left. This is your study time. But we're not just going to write study in those blocks. That's too vague. We're going to get specific. This is where you defeat overwhelm. Look at your syllabus. You have to read 3 chapters of your MedSurg textbook this week. You estimate that will take you about 6 hours. So you find 3 2-hour blocks in your week and you specifically label them. Read MedSurg 5 to 6. You have a pharmacology lecture to watch. That's a 1-hour block labeled Watch Pharm Lecture. Diuretics. You have a discussion post due Thursday. You schedule a 90-minute block on Wednesday labeled Write Ethics Discussion Post. See the difference? You've transformed a vague, terrifying list of tasks into a concrete, actionable plan. When you wake up on Tuesday morning, you don't have to waste mental energy deciding what to work on. You just look at your calendar. It says 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. is Pathophysiology Deep Dive, Cellular Injury. So that's what you do. You've removed the friction of decision-making, which is often the biggest barrier to getting started. Think about your energy levels. Are you a morning person? That's when you schedule your deep work, the heavy cognitive lifting. This is for understanding complex topics like the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system or acid-base balance. Your lower energy periods, like that post-lunch slump, are perfect for shallow work. This includes things like organizing your digital files, responding to emails, or participating in a low-stakes discussion forum. You're matching the task to your brain's capacity. And please, for the love of all that is holy, schedule breaks. Schedule a 15-minute break every 90 minutes. Schedule a full hour for lunch. Schedule a 30-minute walk. If you don't schedule breaks, your brain will take them anyway, in the form of scrolling through social media or staring blankly at the wall. By scheduling them, you make them intentional and rejuvenating, not a source of guilt. Now, if you really want to level this up, you can introduce the concept of thematic days. This is a strategy used by some of the most productive people in the world, and it's perfectly suited for the complexity of nursing school. Instead of switching between 3 different subjects in one day, you dedicate an entire day, or at least a significant portion of it, to a single theme. Think about the mental cost of context switching. Every time you shift from studying pharmacology to writing a paper on nursing theory, your brain has to slam the brakes, unload all the information and context about drug classes, and then spend precious energy loading up an entirely new set of information about nursing theorists. This switching cost is a massive, hidden drain on your productivity and mental energy. Thematic days eliminate this. Your week could look something like this. Monday is Patho and Pharm Day. Your entire focus is on the hard sciences. You watch the lectures, do the reading, make your concept maps, and do practice questions all related to that week's topics. You get into a state of deep flow, making connections between the disease process and the drugs used to treat it. Wednesday becomes Clinical and Skills Prep Day. You focus entirely on getting ready for your upcoming clinical rotation. You do your patient research, write out your care plan drafts, practice calculations, and review procedures in your skills textbook. Friday could be your assignments and admin day. This is when you knock out all your discussion posts, work on that big research paper, and handle administrative tasks like checking your school email and planning the week ahead. By grouping similar tasks together, you create synergy. You stay in the same mental neighborhood all day, which allows for deeper understanding and better retention. You're not just checking boxes, you're immersing yourself in a subject. It's like the difference between visiting 3 countries in 3 days versus spending 3 days fully exploring one city. The latter gives you a much richer and more meaningful experience. I know what some of you might be thinking. My life is too unpredictable for this. I have kids. My work schedule changes. I hear you. The more chaotic your life is, the more you need a default plan. This schedule isn't a rigid prison. It's a flexible blueprint. When life throws you a curveball, your kid gets sick, your boss asks you to stay late, you don't have to panic. You simply look at your calendar, see what block you missed, farm practice questions, and find a new place to drag and drop it. The plan makes you resilient to chaos because you always know what needs to be done and what you have time for. Without a plan, a single interruption can derail your entire week because you lose all momentum. This system, time blocking combined with thematic days, is about creating the non-negotiable space in your life required for the deep thinking that nursing school demands. It's how you go from being constantly reactive and stressed to being proactive and in control. You're no longer a victim of your schedule. You are its architect. You build a structure that not only supports your studies, but also protects your sanity and your personal life. So you've carved out the time. You have a 2-hour block on Tuesday morning labeled Master the Cardiac System. But having the time is only half the battle. How do you make sure that time is spent in the most brain-friendly, effective way possible? How do you turn that 2-hour study block from a passive reading session into a knowledge-building powerhouse that actually cements information in your long-term memory? That leads us directly to our 4th tip, which is all about transforming passive learning into an active, unforgettable process. The single biggest trap in any online program, especially one as demanding as nursing, is the illusion of competence. It's that feeling you get after spending 3 hours with your textbook, your favorite highlighter bleeding through the pages, and a playlist of lectures humming in the background. You feel productive. You feel like you've put in the work. But when the exam comes and you're faced with a question that asks you to apply that knowledge, your mind goes blank. Why? Because you've been a passive observer, not an active participant in your own learning. Passive learning is like watching a travel show about Paris. You can see the Eiffel Tower, you can hear about the Louvre, you can watch someone eat a croissant. You might even be able to recognize those things on a quiz. But it doesn't mean you know how to navigate the metro, order a coffee in French, or understand the cultural nuances of the city. To do that, you have to go to Paris. You have to actively engage with it. Studying for nursing school is the same. Simply reading, highlighting, and rewatching is the equivalent of watching the travel show. It creates familiarity, not fluency. And in nursing, fluency is the only thing that matters. Let me tell you about a student I once mentored. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was brilliant and incredibly dedicated. For her first pharmacology exam, she did everything she thought she was supposed to do. She read every single chapter, highlighted key drug classes, made hundreds of flashcards with the drug name on one side and the side effects on the other, and she rewatched every lecture at 1.5 speed. She felt prepared. She felt confident. Then she sat for the exam and her heart sank. The questions weren't asking, "What is a side effect of lisinopril?" They were asking things like, "A patient on lisinopril complains of a persistent dry cough. What is the nurse's priority action? Sarah froze. She could recognize the words lisinopril and cough, but she hadn't built the mental connection to understand the why, the pathophysiology behind the side effect, or the what next, the critical thinking of the nursing process. She had memorized a list of facts, but she hadn't learned the language of pharmacology. She barely passed that exam, and it was a devastating wake-up call. That experience forced her to completely overhaul her study method, shifting from a passive fact collector to an active knowledge builder. The first technique she adopted, and the one I want you to start using tonight, is a method so powerful it feels like a cheat code for learning. It's called the Feynman technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, who was famous for his ability to explain incredibly complex ideas in very simple terms. The process has 4 simple steps. First, pick a concept you need to learn. Let's stick with Sarah's challenge, the ACE inhibitor lisinopril. Second, get a blank sheet of paper or open a blank document, and at the top, write lisinopril. Now explain this concept out loud, as if you were teaching it to someone who knows nothing about medicine. A friend, a family member, or even just an imaginary 12-year-old. Don't just list facts. Tell a story. You might say something like, okay, so imagine your blood vessels are like little hoses, and there's a hormone in your body called angiotensin that acts like a hand squeezing those hoses, making the pressure inside go way up. What lisinopril does is it stops that hand from forming in the first place. It blocks the enzyme, the ACE, that creates the squeezer. So the hoses relax, the pressure goes down, and the heart doesn't have to work so hard. Third, and this is the most crucial step, identify the gaps in your explanation. As you were explaining it, where did you stumble? Maybe you couldn't remember what ACE stood for. Maybe you got fuzzy on how it affects the kidneys or why it causes that dry cough. Every time you hesitate or say that thingy, or have to gloss over a detail, that's your brain waving a giant red flag saying, I don't really get this part. Circle those areas of weakness. Fourth, go back to your source material, your textbook, your lecture notes, and fill in those specific gaps. Then repeat the process. Refine your explanation, simplify your analogies, and explain it again until you can get through the entire concept smoothly, simply, and confidently. This technique is brutal because it doesn't let you hide. It forces you to confront what you don't know and convert shaky, surface-level memory into deep, interconnected understanding. The second active learning strategy is to become an architect of your knowledge using concept maps. Nursing is not a collection of isolated facts. It's a web of interconnected ideas. A new diagnosis, a weird lab value, a sudden change in vital signs, they all mean something in relation to each other. A concept map is a visual way to build that web on paper. Here's how it works. Start with a central topic in the middle of a page, for example, myocardial infarction, or a heart attack. Then branch out. Create main categories. What are the risk factors? Hypertension, smoking, high cholesterol. What is the pathophysiology? Plaque rupture, thrombus formation, coronary artery occlusion. What are the signs and symptoms? Chest pain, shortness of breath, diaphoresis. What are the diagnostic tests? ECG, troponin levels. What are the nursing interventions? Administer oxygen, morphine, aspirin, nitroglycerin. But don't stop there. The real magic happens when you start drawing lines between the branches. Draw a line from coronary artery occlusion to chest pain, and right on that line, causes lack of oxygen to heart muscle, resulting in. Draw a line from the intervention nitroglycerin back to chest pain, and right relieves by vasodilating coronary arteries. You are literally creating a visual schematic of your clinical reasoning. You're not just memorizing that a heart attack patient gets an ECG. You're understanding that the ECG is used to look for ST segment elevation, which is a direct sign of heart muscle injury caused by the artery occlusion. This method transforms your brain from a filing cabinet of facts into a dynamic, problem-solving engine, which is exactly what you need to be at the bedside. The final and perhaps most critical active learning technique is mastering the art of practice questions. And I don't mean just doing them to see your score. I mean dissecting them like a surgeon. Every NCLEX style question is a mini case study, a puzzle to be solved. First, when you approach a question, don't just read it. Analyze it. Identify the key information, the age of the patient, the diagnosis, the specific symptoms, and most importantly, what the question is truly asking for. Is it asking for an assessment, an intervention, a priority action? Next, and this is a game changer, before you even look at the options, try to predict the answer in your own mind. Based on the scenario, what do you think the correct nursing action would be? This forces you to retrieve information from your brain, not just recognize it from a list. Then evaluate every single option. Don't just look for the right answer. For the correct option, articulate why it's correct. And for the 3 incorrect options, the distractors, you must articulate why they are wrong. Is it the wrong timing? Is it not the priority? Is it contraindicated for this patient? This process of eliminating distractors is where the deepest learning occurs. It sharpens your clinical judgment and prepares you for the nuance of real-world nursing, where the best answer is often hidden among several good, but not correct options. For every single question you get wrong, or even one you guessed on and got right, your work isn't done. You must remediate. Go back to your textbook and find the exact information that explains why you were wrong. This closes the loop and turns a mistake into a permanent piece of knowledge. These active strategies, the Feynman technique, concept mapping, and deep analysis of practice questions, are not easy. They require more mental effort than passively highlighting a chapter. They will feel harder. But they are the difference between knowing the name of a drug and understanding how it saves a life. They are the difference between passing an exam and becoming a competent, confident nurse. It's the shift from, what do I need to memorize, to what do I need to understand? All of this active work, however, generates a massive amount of information. You'll have concept maps, simplified explanations, and notes from all your practice questions. So how do you organize this mountain of high-quality, actively learned material so it's not just a chaotic mess? How do you create a system that allows for efficient review and ensures you don't forget pathophysiology while you're learning pharmacology? That brings us to our 5th and final tip, which is all about building your second brain. This idea of a second brain might sound like something out of a science fiction movie, but I assure you, it's one of the most practical and powerful tools you can develop, not just for nursing school, but for your entire career. So what is it? Simply put, a second brain is a digital system for capturing, organizing, and connecting all the information you learn. It's not just a folder full of Word documents or a stack of notebooks. It's a personalized, searchable, interconnected web of your own knowledge. Think of it as your own private Wikipedia built by you for you. Why is this a complete game changer for a nursing student? Because nursing school isn't about memorizing isolated facts. It's about understanding complex, interconnected systems. The diuretic you learn about in pharmacology directly impacts the fluid and electrolyte balance you study in med-surg, which is happening inside the renal system you learned about in anatomy and physiology, and it's all treating a condition you covered in pathophysiology. Trying to hold all of those connections in your head at once is like trying to juggle water. It's impossible. Your brain is fantastic at thinking and creating, but it's surprisingly bad at being a storage cabinet. Cognitive science tells us about the forgetting curve, how quickly we lose information if we don't actively review it. A second brain flattens that curve. It outsources the job of remembering everything, freeing up your mental energy to do the real work, thinking critically and making connections. You stop spending hours trying to find that one specific note about beta blockers and instead spend that time understanding why a patient with hypertension would be prescribed one. So how do you actually build this thing? It boils down to a simple, repeatable process. First, you capture. Second, you organize and connect. And third, you distill. Let's start with capturing. Your goal is to get information out of the world and into your system with as little friction as possible. This includes your lecture notes, key points from textbook readings, insightful diagrams, links to helpful YouTube videos, notes from clinicals, everything. The key is to have a single trusted place for all of this to land initially. A digital inbox. Many people use a simple notes app for this, or a dedicated page in their system labeled Inbox. When you're in a lecture, you're not worried about where the note should go permanently. You're just focused on capturing the important information. You find a brilliant article on sterile dressing changes? You save it to your inbox. You have a light bulb moment during clinicals about patient communication? You jot it down in your inbox. The sorting comes later. This removes the pressure of having to organize on the fly, which is a recipe for disaster. Now for the most important part, organizing and connecting. This is where the magic happens. The traditional method of organizing is by class and semester. You have a folder for Pathophysiology Fall 2024, another for Pharmacology Fall 2024, and so on. This seems logical, but it's incredibly limiting. It creates digital silos. The information is trapped, unable to connect with related concepts in other folders. A second brain flips this on its head. You organize by topic or concept, independent of where you learned it. So instead of a folder for your pharmacology class, You create a single note or page for every single drug or drug class. You'd have a page for metoprolol, a page for furosemide, a page for ACE inhibitors. Then, when you're taking notes in your MedSurg class about managing a patient with heart failure, and the lecturer mentions furosemide, you don't just write it down. You create a link directly to your furosemide page. Instantly, you've built a bridge between a disease state and its treatment. A few weeks later, in pathophysiology, you learn about the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. You go to your ACE inhibitors page and add a link to your notes on that system, explaining the mechanism of action. Do you see what's happening? You're not just taking notes anymore. You're weaving a web of knowledge. Over time, your furosemide page will contain information from pharmacology, MedSurg, and patho all in one place. It becomes the ultimate consolidated resource on that topic. The tools that make this possible are modern note-taking apps like Notion, Obsidian, or OneNote. They are built for this kind of interconnected thinking. They allow you to create links between pages with just a couple of keystrokes. In Obsidian, this creates a visual graph that literally shows you how all your ideas are connected. It's an incredible way to see the bigger picture. In Notion, you can create powerful databases like a master drug card database where every entry is its own page, and you can tag and sort them by class, side effects, or nursing considerations. The specific tool doesn't matter as much as the principle. Organize by concept and link everything. Finally, we have to distill. A second brain isn't a digital dumping ground. It's a curated garden. Capturing information is easy. Understanding it is hard. Distilling is the process of making the information your own. It's active, not passive. After you've captured a note, you need to go back maybe a day or a week later and process it. This is where you engage in what's called progressive summarization. On your first pass, you might read through your raw notes and simply bold the most interesting or important sentences. The next time you review that note, you read only the bolded sentences and highlight the most critical phrases within them. Finally, you might write a 1 or 2 sentence summary at the very top of the note in your own words. Let's walk through an example. You're studying diabetes mellitus type 1. First, you capture. You create a new page in your system called Diabetes mellitus type 1. Throughout the week, you add your lecture notes, a diagram showing the pathophysiology of the pancreas, and a link to a video explaining the difference between DKA and HHS. It's all just thrown onto that one page. Next, you organize and connect. On that page, you create headings: pathophysiology, clinical manifestations, diagnostic criteria, and nursing management. Under nursing management, you write about insulin administration. You then turn the word insulin into a link to your dedicated page all about insulin. You also create a link to your note on diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA. Since it's a major complication, you tag the page with things like #endocrine, #chronic illness, #MedSurg. Finally, you distill. Few days later, you revisit the page. You read through your notes and bold the key concepts: autoimmune destruction of beta cells, absolute insulin deficiency, polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. Then you go back and highlight the absolute must-know terms: autoimmune destruction, absolute insulin deficiency. At the very top of the page, you write your own executive summary. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where the body destroys its own pancreatic beta cells, leading to a total lack of insulin production, which requires lifelong insulin therapy to manage blood glucose. Look at what you've just created. You have a single, comprehensive, easy-to-review source of truth for diabetes mellitus type 1. It's connected to other key concepts like insulin and DKA. It's summarized for quick review. And the very act of building this page, of linking, summarizing, and rephrasing, has seared the information into your actual brain far more effectively than reading a textbook chapter 3 times ever could. When it's time to study for your final exam, or even the NCLEX a year from now, you're not starting from scratch. You're not digging through 100 different PowerPoints and notebooks. You're reviewing a system that you've been carefully, intentionally building since day one. You're not just studying. You're interacting with your own curated library of knowledge. This system reduces anxiety, eliminates disorganization, and transforms studying from a frantic search for information into a calm, focused process of review and deep understanding. It's the single biggest leap you can make in becoming a more effective and confident student. And now that you have this perfectly organized, centralized system, this second brain, for all your nursing school knowledge, the next question becomes, what's the most powerful way to use it? How do you take all that information you've so neatly compiled and transform it from passive text on a page into active, life-saving clinical judgment? This brings us to our fourth essential tip, and honestly, this is the one that separates the students who merely survive nursing school from the ones who truly thrive and graduate ready to be incredible nurses. The tip is this: you have to stop thinking like a student and start thinking like a nurse. Now, that might sound like some vague motivational poster advice, but it's not. It is the most practical, tactical, and game-changing mindset shift you can possibly make. A student's primary question is, what do I need to memorize to pass this test? A nurse's primary question is, how will I use this information to keep my patient safe and help them heal? They are two fundamentally different worlds, and the sooner you start living in the second one, the easier and more meaningful your entire education will become. Let me tell you about a student I once knew. We'll call her Maria. Maria was brilliant. In her prerequisite classes, anatomy, physiology, microbiology, she was at the top of her class. She had a photographic memory. She could label every bone, trace every nerve pathway, and recite the Krebs cycle in her sleep. She came into the core nursing program with immense confidence. And for the first few weeks she did great. Quizzes on vocabulary, on normal lab values, on the steps of a procedure, she aced them all. But then came the first major Med-Surg exam. The questions changed. They weren't asking, what is the normal range for serum potassium? The question was, you are caring for a 72-year-old male with a history of congestive heart failure, who is taking furosemide. His morning lab work shows a potassium level of 2.9 milliequivalents per liter. What is your priority nursing action? And Maria froze. She knew 2.9 was low. She knew furosemide was a diuretic. She knew congestive heart failure was a problem with the heart. She had all the individual puzzle pieces, but she had never practiced putting them together. She hadn't trained her brain to connect the dots under pressure. She couldn't see the full picture. The diuretic was causing her patient to lose too much potassium, a condition called hypokalemia. Severe hypokalemia can cause life-threatening cardiac dysrhythmias. Therefore, the priority action was to address the heart's electrical stability, which meant getting the patient on a cardiac monitor and notifying the physician immediately. Maria didn't make that connection. She chose an answer like encourage the patient to eat a banana, which, while not wrong, was not the priority. She ended up with a C- on that exam, and it shattered her confidence. She was memorizing facts, but the exam, and more importantly, the profession of nursing, was testing her judgment. The way to avoid Maria's fate is to constantly ask yourself the clinical why. For every single fact you learn, you must filter it through a clinical lens. Don't just learn that the normal range for hemoglobin is roughly 12 to 17. Ask yourself, why does this matter? What happens to a patient if their hemoglobin is 8? Well, they'll be tired, pale, short of breath. Why? Because hemoglobin is the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen. Less hemoglobin means less oxygen delivery to the tissues. Okay, so as a nurse, what am I going to do about it? I'll assess for those symptoms, I'll implement fall precautions because they might be dizzy, I'll space out their activities to conserve energy, and I'll anticipate a doctor's order for a blood transfusion. What am I watching for during that transfusion? A reaction. Do you see the difference? It's a chain of reasoning that starts with a single piece of data and ends with a concrete nursing action plan designed to protect a human being. This is the job. This is nursing. So how do you practice this, especially in an online environment where you're not physically on the floor? You have to create the scenarios for yourself. Here's a powerful technique. The one-page clinical story. Every week, pick one major disease or concept you're studying, let's say type 1 diabetes. Instead of just reading the chapter and making flashcards of definitions, you're going to create a one-page story. First, in your own words, write 1 or 2 sentences on the pathophysiology. What is actually going wrong in the body? Simple language. The body's immune system is attacking the pancreas, so it can't produce insulin. Boom. Second, list the classic signs and symptoms. But don't just list them. Next to each one, write the why. Polyuria or frequent urination. Why? Because there's too much sugar in the blood, and the body tries to flush it out through the kidneys. Polydipsia or excessive thirst. Why? Because all that urination is dehydrating the patient. Polyphagia or excessive hunger. Why? Because even though there's tons of sugar in the blood, it can't get into the cells to be used for energy without insulin, so the cells are literally starving. Third, write down the top 3 to 5 priority nursing interventions. Again, include the rationale, the why. Administer insulin as prescribed. Rationale: to allow glucose to enter the cells and lower blood sugar. Monitor blood glucose levels. Rationale: to evaluate the effectiveness of insulin and prevent hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. Teach the patient about diet and insulin administration. Rationale: to empower the patient with the skills for long-term self-management and prevent complications. Finally, list the most critical life-threatening complications. For type 1 diabetes, a big one is diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA. What are the signs you'd be watching for? Fruity scented breath, Kussmaul respirations, altered mental status. By the time you finish this one-page story, you haven't just memorized facts about diabetes. You have walked through the experience of caring for a diabetic patient. You understand the disease from the inside out. You've connected the dots. And when you see a test question about a patient with a blood sugar of 450 and fruity breath, your brain won't freeze. It will immediately activate that entire mental model, and you'll know exactly what's happening and what to do. This process works for everything. When you're studying pharmacology, don't just memorize that a side effect of lisinopril is a dry, hacking cough. Ask why. It's because ACE inhibitors prevent the breakdown of a substance called bradykinin, which can irritate the lungs. Understanding that tiny why does two things. First, it makes the fact 10 times stickier in your memory. Second, it builds your clinical authority. When your future patient calls and says they have this annoying cough, you won't just say, "Oh, that's a side effect." You can explain why it happens, which builds trust and shows you truly understand your craft. In an online program, you have to be more deliberate about seeking out these connections. Your course's case studies are not optional fluff. They are your virtual clinicals. Treat them like gold. Work through them before looking at the answers. Pause and ask yourself, okay, what would I do first? Use YouTube. There are incredible nurse educators online who create videos explaining complex topics with animations and real-world stories. They can help you visualize the pathophysiology in a way that a textbook sometimes can't. And engage deeply in your class discussion forums. Don't just post your required 2 responses. Ask probing, why questions. I see that we're supposed to monitor for hyperkalemia in patients with kidney failure, but I'm struggling to understand the connection. Can anyone explain the pathophysiology behind that? That starts a conversation that forces everyone to think critically, and you'll learn more from writing out that explanation for a peer than you will from just reading it. Adopting this think like a nurse mentality does more than just prepare you for exams. It prepares you for your first day on the job. It builds a foundation of deep, interconnected knowledge that allows you to be flexible, to think on your feet, and to make safe, effective decisions for your patients. It transforms studying from a chore of rote memorization into the fascinating, high-stakes puzzle of the human body. It's the shift that turns fear and uncertainty into confidence and competence. And that confidence is the bedrock of our 5th and final essential tip: build your support system and ruthlessly prioritize your self-care. It might sound like the softest tip on the list, but in the high-pressure cooker of online nursing school, it is your absolute lifeline. There's a pervasive myth in demanding fields like medicine and nursing, the myth of the lone wolf, the brilliant, solitary student who locks themselves away, fueled only by caffeine and sheer willpower, and emerges victorious. This is a dangerous fantasy. Nursing is not a solo sport. It's one of the most collaborative professions on the planet. Your training for that collaboration starts now, not when you get your first pair of scrubs. In a traditional classroom, a support system can form organically. You see the same faces every day, you whisper questions to the person next to you, you form study groups in the library. Online, you have to be intentional. You have to build it. Your classmates are not just a list of names on a discussion board. They are your future colleagues. They are the only other people on Earth who understand the specific pressure of juggling a pathophysiology exam with a virtual clinical simulation and a family obligation. Reach out. Start a group chat. Form a virtual study group on Zoom or Discord. You'll be shocked how quickly you find your people. The person who's a whiz at pharmacology might struggle with writing care plans, which happens to be your strength. You can trade knowledge, quiz each other, and most importantly, you can vent. You can have someone to send a message to at 11 p.m. that just says, "I don't think I can do this," and get a reply back that says, "Yes, you can. We've got this. Let's talk tomorrow." That connection is more valuable than any textbook. Your support system also extends to your faculty. In an online environment, it's easy to see your instructors as distant figures, grading your assignments from afar. This is a mistake. They are your single greatest resource. They hold office hours for a reason. They want you to succeed. Sending a thoughtful professional email with a specific question doesn't make you look weak. It makes you look engaged. It shows you care enough to seek clarity. A student who actively seeks help is a student who is taking ownership of their education, and that is precisely the kind of student who becomes an excellent, safe, and proactive nurse. Don't ever be afraid to ask for help, whether it's from a professor, a teaching assistant, or an academic advisor. They are all part of the team you are building for your success. And the most important member of that team is you. This brings us to the second half of this final tip: prioritizing self-care. Let me be blunt. Burnout in nursing is a full-blown epidemic, and it often starts in nursing school. The relentless pace, the emotional weight of the material, the constant feeling of being behind. It's a perfect recipe for exhaustion. You might think that pulling an all-nighter to cram for an exam is a sign of dedication. It's not. It's a sign of poor planning and a disregard for your own well-being, which is the very thing you are training to protect in others. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot provide compassionate, detail-oriented care to a patient when your own mind and body are running on fumes. Self-care is not a luxury you earn after you finish studying. It is a non-negotiable part of the study process itself. It is a professional responsibility. So, what does this look like in practice? It means scheduling your breaks with the same seriousness that you schedule your study blocks. It means using techniques like the Pomodoro method, 25 minutes of focus work, followed by a 5-minute break to stand up, stretch, look out a window, and drink a glass of water. It means protecting your sleep like it's the most precious resource you have, because it is. It's during sleep that your brain consolidates memories and locks in the information you just spent hours trying to learn. Sacrificing sleep is like buying a brand new, expensive hard drive and then smashing it with a hammer before you've saved your files. It also means having a life outside of nursing. You must consciously build a wall between your study space and your personal life. When you are done for the day, be done. Close the laptop, put the books away, go for a walk, call a friend and talk about anything other than nursing. Watch a stupid movie, cook a good meal. Your brain needs time to decompress and process. If you are constantly marinating in cortisol and stress, your ability to learn, retain information, and think critically will plummet. Think of it as strategic rest. Professional athletes don't train 24 hours a day. They understand that recovery is when growth actually happens. Your brain is no different. Self-care isn't selfish. It's the ultimate study strategy. It's what ensures you can show up tomorrow, and the next day, and for your entire career, as the sharp, resilient, and compassionate nurse you are meant to be. So let's bring it all together. We've covered 5 essential strategies for thriving in your online nursing program. Think of them as a complete system. First, you create your command center. You carve out a dedicated physical and digital space that signals to your brain, it's time to focus. This is your foundation, the solid ground you build everything else upon. Second, you stop being a passive spectator and become an active participant in your own learning. You don't just read, you question, you connect, you teach. This is the engine that drives true understanding. Third, you master your tools. You become fluent in the technology of your online platform, transforming it from a frustrating obstacle into a powerful ally. This is your toolkit, giving you the right instrument for every task. Fourth, you connect every fact, every pathway, every medication to the why. You anchor your knowledge in the real world of patient outcomes. This is your compass, ensuring that all your effort is pointed in the right direction, toward becoming a competent, caring practitioner. And finally, you build your crew and maintain your vessel. You lean on your support system and prioritize your own well-being, recognizing that you cannot save others if you do not first protect yourself. This is your fuel and your co-pilots, sustaining you for the long journey ahead. Each of these tips feeds into the others, creating a powerful cycle of success. A well-organized space makes active learning easier. Active learning makes the technology more intuitive. Understanding the why makes you a more valuable member of your study group. And a strong support system gives you the encouragement to keep going when it gets tough. The road you have chosen is not an easy one. There will be days when you feel overwhelmed. There will be concepts that feel impossible to grasp. There will be times you question if you have what it takes. In those moments, I want you to remember why you started. You didn't choose this path because it was easy. You chose it because you felt a calling to help, to heal, to comfort, and to serve. You are learning the intricate science and the profound art of caring for human beings at their most vulnerable. The information you are struggling with today might be the very piece of knowledge that allows you to save a life tomorrow. The skill you practice in a simulation will one day be the steady hand that a patient and their family depends on. This journey is about so much more than passing exams. It's about a fundamental transformation. It's about forging yourself into the person someone will one day call my nurse. It's an incredible privilege and a profound responsibility. The work you are doing right now, sitting at your desk, clicking through modules, and reading late into the night, it matters. It is the unseen, unglamorous, but absolutely essential work that builds the foundation for a lifetime of impact. So take these strategies, adapt them, make them your own, and use them to build a system that works for you. What's your number one tip for staying sane and successful in online classes? Share it in the comments below. Let's learn from each other and build a community right here. If this video provided you with some value, consider sharing it with a fellow nursing student. You never know who might need to hear this today. The path is hard, but you are tougher. You're not just studying for a grade. You are preparing for a calling. Now go make it happen.